Okay, so what is Draco Malfoy? That's actually in the next section of the book. What does Draco Malfoy do?
He throws the remember ball like really high. Yeah.
Yeah, this is right in the next section. So, whose rememberall is it?
He takes Neville's remember.
Yes, he takes Neville's rememberall and he throws it, and it's Harry who jumps on his broom and catches it. Now, who catches him doing that?
McGonagall.
Right?
Right? And then why is Harry a natural at flying in a broom? Yep, because of his father, and the other I accept it because of his dad. And even Sirius Black had bought him a small little miniature broom. And there's a picture of him in a photo album that Hagrid gives him later, him on a broom. But it's because of his father. And we learned that not only because of his father, but who learns it? It's Ron, because he was polishing in the trophy room and says, yeah, your dad like got awards, right? Okay. All right. Francis is on top there. Okay, so we haven't gotten to this section yet. In the Mirror of Erised, in the movie, he only sees his parents, but in the book, he sees his parents and the rest of his family. So he sees his like grandfather and like all these people that look like him. So in the Mirror of Erised, he sees more than just his parents. So if you haven't gotten there yet, this is the whole book. So this is going to be kind of tough for you guys if you haven't finished reading. Yep, the answer is true. Does Harry believe him?
No.
Yeah, Harry doesn't really believe him, and he always wonders what he actually sees. In Fantastic Beasts, we have it alludes to what he sees, right? Okay, all right. Stephanie, Valentina, and Deja are at the top of the scoreboard. Yeah, so this is a big spoiler. Anytime Dumbledore's away from the school, something happens. This happens in book 1. It happens in book 3. No, not book 3. Book 5. And in book 7, he is not at the school. So it's spoiled there as well too, that bad things happen when Dumbledore's away. Ooh. Yeah, he couldn't get around the Mirror of Erised, right? Because he desired the stone, but he couldn't get it because he wanted to do bad things with it. So in the Mirror of Erised, Dumbledore sets it up to protect the stone. Nicely done, guys. Yeah, it's kind of a trick question because it's kind of all split up, but your best answer was the red one. Remember when I told you that the number 3 and 7 were going to show up in different places along the way? In Quidditch, it's the same thing. 7 players. It is a gender neutral game. You must have men and women playing in the game on a team. So it is gender neutral, mainly because they are flying on brooms. It's a big part of it. So it remains gender neutral. So it is 7 players on a team, right? 7 is considered a magical number. It's also considered a very biblical number. It shows up in the Bible, you know, the earth was created in 7 days, all that. So be aware of 7 and 3. This is a great scene. When you get to this part of the book, make sure you pay attention to that scene. Neville Longbottom gains courage. Okay, so make sure you watch for that scene. We'll talk about that scene a little bit as well too. Exactly. Either of those two would have gotten you a correct answer. Nice, everybody. Fluffy. A 3-headed dog. It's a Cerberus. Yeah, through Harry's touch, but it's really the spell that his mother cast. And we will talk about that. That's important for this at the end of this book. And it's also going to be important for book. It's kind of part of it is in book 7 as well too. Any of those would have been great. Courage is a really good one. So 10 points to Hufflepuff, 15 points to Gryffindor, and 20 points, another 20 points to Gryffindor for having a first and second place person. So this pushes Gryffindor probably into the lead. All right. So that brings us back to where we were. Okay. So here we are. All right, good job, Gryffindors, for scoring some much needed points. Okay, so that was an active part. Let's do something else. Let's go back to where we were. Let's try to get through for the next 15, 20, 25 minutes. Get through more of this. If we could finish this book by Wednesday, I would be thrilled. So, do you guys see any character growth in Harry from when he was at the Dursleys to now being at Hogwarts? Now that we're getting into chapter 9, is there any character growth for Harry? Where can you see this character growth? Give me an example of his character growth. He's standing up for himself. He's becoming a little bit more confident. Be specific to a particular point in the book. You're seeing that, but where did you see it? Like what scene? Definitely at the end when he faces Quirrell. He's definitely much braver. Good specific example. What's another specific example that shows his character growth? Yes. So the next chapter, the Midnight Duel, he stands up against Draco, right? He also stands up against Draco with the Remember All. That's another great example. Okay. Okay, so also I want to point out as we are going through this, we are also noticing that the subplot about the Gringotts Bank is being talked about on page 141 at the end of chapter 8, that they talk about it being on July 31st. Okay. And that nothing had been taken from that bank. Okay, so keep in mind that Harry is trying to move through this and he doesn't want to deal anything with the Gringotts Bank, but he's starting to see that that's an important part of it. Another moment that we're going to see coming up that Harry has had some character development and growth is when he decides that he and Ron decide to go and save Hermione from the troll. You see in the picture there on the Halloween chapter, which is chapter 10, which is right after chapter 8, 9, which is this chapter that we're covering. So we're going to see Harry's growth there as well too. Harry is challenged to a couple things. In the broom challenge, he feels like he is a natural. Harry gets on the broom, catches the Remember All. McGonagall sees him and says, hey, you know, your dad was in you know, a seeker as well too. The idea of the seekers is important. When we get to book 4, we will be in one place at one time where you have all the seekers pretty much represented in book 4. And in fact, there are 7 seekers that play Quidditch that are also in book 4 and are represented in the book. So that's really another important point for the idea of Quidditch and the idea of seekers, right? Seekers are trying to catch something. Harry wants just to become the best wizard, okay? But there are other seekers throughout the story, but in book 4, we get like a lot more seekers together. Okay. One of the important things is that the order of the matches for Quidditch happen a particular way as well too, since we're talking about Quidditch. There are 3 chasers, 2 beaters, and 1 keeper. The chasers chase the ball to get it through the hoops. The beaters have bats to beat away balls, and 1 keeper to guard the goalposts. 3 goalposts, 7 players. 3 and 7, once again, 1 seeker. The seeker's only job is to do what? His only job is to catch the golden snitch, right? And the golden snitch, it's gold because it is the smallest ball. It's also hardest to see, and it's because it is the biggest prize, 4 points, worth 150 points. The matches always happen in a particular order. It's Gryffindor against Slytherin, Ravenclaw, and Hufflepuff. Each order has a representation. In book 4, the representations are Slytherin, Hufflepuff, and then Ravenclaw. So they move Ravenclaw to the end in book 4. In book 2 and 3, I can't recall the order, but I know in book 4 it changes. All right, but usually they play Slytherin first because they are their biggest nemesis for the Gryffindors. Okay, the other part we're going to point out is Harry gets into an argument with Draco, and Hermione hears them on page 154 in the Great Hall talking with Draco, and Draco calls them to a midnight duel, a wizard's duel. And Hermione gets involved, right? And she says, you know, they both looked up. It was Hermione Granger. Can't a person eat in peace in this place, said Ron. Hermione ignored him and spoke to Harry. I couldn't help overhearing what you and Malfoy were saying. Bet you could, Ron muttered. And you mustn't go wandering around the school at night. Think of the points you'll lose Gryffindor if you're caught. And think of the point of if you're caught, and you're bound to be, it's really very selfish of you. And it's really none of your business, said Harry. Goodbye, said Ron. So this idea of selfishness is really important. This actual kind of discussion happens in book 7. there's a discussion between Ron and Hermione, and actually it's Ron and Harry, but Hermione is there, where they talk about his selfishness. It starts to bubble up in book 6, but it really comes to fruition in book 7, that this is a character trait that Harry starts to have. Hermione sees it here, that he's being selfish to do this, but in book 7, it's for a different reason, right? So that's this part of this character trait of Harry's really gets exploded later. Okay, so keep an eye on that later on. So the other thing that happens is that they decide to go to this midnight duel, and Hermione is there, and she tells them at the Gryffindor Tower, like, I was going to call Percy and tell him you guys were going to do this. And Harry says Harry couldn't believe anyone could be so interfering. So Hermione is given the character trait of being interfering, being a know-it-all as well too. And she even tells him, I can't believe you're going to do this, Harry. She doesn't talk to Harry. And so she just tells them not to do this. So they decide to do it anyway at all. And Hermione says, don't you care about Gryffindor? Do you only care about yourselves? I don't want Slytherin to win the House Cup, and you'll lose all the points I got from Professor McGonagall for knowing about switching spells. Go away. All right, but I warned you. Just remember what I said when you're down on the train tomorrow, on the train home tomorrow. You're so, and what they were, they didn't find out. Hermione had turned to the portrait of the fat lady to get back inside and found herself facing an empty painting. The fat lady had gone on a nighttime visit, and Hermione was locked out of the Gryffindor Tower. So she gets locked out too. She ends up going with them, and they all get caught. How do they get caught? Peeves the poltergeist rats them out, right? Peeves the poltergeist rats them out and says that they're out of the corridor and they get caught. Not only do they get caught, it's Neville as well too. Neville, Ron, Hermione, and Draco. And when they all get caught, they get to the trap door where there is a 3-headed dog. What kind of a dog is it? It's a Cerberus. Do you recall? It's a Cerberus. On page 160, a Cerberus is from mythology. And what does a Cerberus do? Cerberus.
Doesn't it protect or guards the underworld?
Yeah, it guards the gates of hell. That's what it does. It guards the gates of hell. That's what it's supposed to be. And so here so if that guards the gates of hell, then we get to see that this is guarding this trap door. That's what Hermione notices, right? This is important in the hero's journey, which we're going to cover as soon as we're done with this book. We're going to cover the hero's journey, and I've got to give you some things to read. So and watch. So when they go on the hero's journey, the last part of the hero's journey is that last level. You know that last level in your video game, right? Don't they still call it the boss level, the last level? Right? It's the hardest level, but it's usually like horrible. So when they go into the hero's journey, they go into the abyss, and into that abyss is that last obstacle, which is the hero has to do all of his magical powers, all of his knowledge to beat that level. Okay, for Harry, that becomes when he goes to get the Sorcerer's Stone, and we'll see that, and that's what that trap door represents, that the Cerberus, Fluffy, is guarding. Okay, all right. So one of the most famous quotes by Hermione on the page 162 says, "We could have all been killed or worse, expelled. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to bed." Ron stared after her, his mouth open. No, we don't mind, he said. You think we dragged her along, wouldn't you? But Hermione had given Harry something else to think about as he climbed back into bed. The dog was guarding something. So, for Hermione, the worst thing is being expelled. All right, who gives Harry a broom for Quidditch?
McGonagall.
McGonagall. She sends him a nice note on page 164 and tells him, now in the movie he opens it right at the table, but not in the book. He gets it from McGonagall, and he gets a new Nimbus 2000, and then he starts getting training with Oliver Wood, the captain of the Quidditch team. All right, so I've already covered Quidditch with you. Of course, one of the things that has to happen is as the characters go through the book, they have to gain knowledge to be able to work through the different challenges that they have. And in this case, they learn Wingardium Leviosa, right? It's Wingardium Leviosa. Make the gar nice and long. Wingardium Leviosa. You can do it, right? Ron, this is Hermione trying to tell Ron because he's just saying it and he's saying it wrong. The other thing that we also notice in Harry's character on page 170 is we notice that Harry starts having this other theme of family and of home. He actually says on page 170, the castle felt more like home than Privet Drive ever had. His lessons too were becoming more and more interesting now that they had mastered the basics. So on Halloween morning, they woke to the delicious smell of baking pumpkin wafting through the corridors. Even better, Professor Flitwick announced in charms that he thought they were ready to start making objects fly, something they had all been dying to try since they'd seen him make Neville's toad zoom around the classroom. So Professor Flitwick in charms class starts to teaching them and teaches them Wingardium Leviosa. Okay, as they go out, it's Hermione Granger who gets to be able to make her feather fly the first. Ron was in a very bad mood by the end of class, and he and Harry walking out, and he says, "It's no wonder no one can stand her," he said to Harry as they pushed their way into the crowded corridors. "She's a nightmare, honestly." Someone knocked into Harry as they hurried past him. It was Hermione. Harry caught a glimpse of her face and was startled to see that she was in tears. "I think she heard you." "So," said Ron, but he looked a bit uncomfortable. She must have noticed she's got no friends." Hermione didn't turn up for the next class and wasn't seen all afternoon. On their way down to the Great Hall for Halloween feast, Harry and Ron overheard Parvati Patel telling her friend Lavender that Hermione was crying in the girls' bathroom and wanted to be left alone. So as we see that Harry gains a friend, we also see that Hermione doesn't, right? But then as we see that there's a troll in being loose in Hogwarts Castle, it's Harry that says we should go after Hermione because she's in the girls' bathroom. And it's actually Ron who does Wingardium Leviosa, and it hits the troll with its own, basically, bat, right? So it's Ron who saves them all, even it's Harry's idea to go to that. Now Hermione lies to McGonagall and Snape and says it was her fault that she went looking after the troll. And it says Hermione hung her head. Harry was speechless. Hermione was the last person to do anything against the rules, and here she was pretending she had to get them out of trouble. It was as if Snape had started handing out sweets. "Miss Granger, 5 points will be taken from Gryffindor for this," said Professor McGonagall. "I'm very disappointed in you. If you're not hurt at all, you'd better be off to Gryffindor Tower. Students are finishing the feast in their houses." Hermione left. And then she turns to them Well, I can't say you were lucky, but not many first years would have taken on a full-grown mountain troll. You each win 5 5 points. Professor Dumbledore will be informed of this. You may go. But at the very end of the chapter, but at that moment on, Hermione Granger became their friend. There are some things you can't share without ending up liking each other, and knocking out a 12-foot troll is one of them. This is a great instance where friendship can be solidified through a struggle, right? And many of you have probably had the same thing. Yes, it's a little bit different from the movie, just a little bit. But the way that that Hermione becomes their friend through this struggle is really important, because that kind of solidifies their friendship. She lies to protect them, and they feel bad for what they've said about her, and so they end up becoming friends. All is forgiven, right? Now, as I'm getting to chapter 11, I'm moving through this really quick. Who else is looking for acceptance, right? It's Hermione. She wants to be accepted, but she's a kind of a know-it-all. She has studied so much about Hogwarts and places, and in order to prove herself, right, as as being able to be a muggle that can be a witch. And she's really trying hard, and that's what's happened to her. And she just wants acceptance as well too. And she finally finds it when she becomes friends with Harry and Ron. Okay, so chapter 11 is Quidditch. And this is important for book 7. How does Harry win the Quidditch tournament?
He catches the snitch in his mouth.
He catches the snitch in his mouth. He almost swallows it. Okay, so this is important because this is represented again in book 7. Okay, so Harry catches it in his mouth, and in book 7 you're going to see that again as well too. And that's page 191. So that's a foreshadowing to book 7 and a mirror of book 7. Harry has to catch the snitch in book 7, but he has to use the snitch to do it. And it's a matter of him touching it with his mouth. Okay. All right. Who decides to fight with Ron? All right, let's talk about the Mirror of Erised. Hey, chapter 12. This will be the last section of this, and the Mirror of Erised is very important. First of all, 2 things for chapter 12. 1, it's Christmas time. So he receives a note and a Christmas gift. Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time that it was returned to you. Use it well. A very Merry Christmas to you. And what does he get? The invisibility cloak. Yes. And so the invisibility cloak is actually really important as well too. Throughout the series, Harry uses it. So you have to be aware that this magical item is also been handed down in inheritance from father to son in their family. And there's a whole mythology that goes with this, of folklore. So we're going to have to cover that, because that becomes actually important later on in the series. But the invisibility cloak is important for Harry getting another magical tool besides his wand, besides his broom, in order to solve the puzzle. We have been given clues as to issues with the Gringotts, right? The trap door. There are all these clues that are happening. The troll was led into Hogwarts. I mean, how does that happen? Okay. It's really important that we watch all these clues throughout. Okay. Now, at Christmas, he gets this cloak, and he also gets what we call a Weasley sweater. Right? Ron gets one from his mom. And then he gets one as well too, with an H on it. He gets a Weasley sweater. And this shows how he's a part of the Weasley family. So it's probably Dumbledore who said something to Molly Weasley about Harry and sent him a sweater as well too. And he wears his sweater to Christmas dinner. And they even make Percy wears his. George had one with a big F on it, and one with a big G, and Fred one with a big F. Everybody has one. And they realize this. And it's Fred and George who tell Percy, you're not sitting with the prefects today, right? Because Christmas is a time for family. And that's all that Harry wants, is family. So that becomes important, because that's going to bring us to the Mirror of Erised when Harry runs into it. On page 207, this theme of family there, on page 203 becomes important for 207, because that is what Harry sees in the Mirror of Erised. Now, the Mirror of Erised, at the top it says, Erised stra iru oit ube kafru oit un ushi. It says, I show not your face, but your heart's desire. And the word Erised is desire written backwards. All right. So what is Harry's greatest desire? Look at the beautiful imagery on page 208.
His family.
His family. The Deathly Hallow. Yes, that was for another question. His family. He wants family. And that's what Fred kind of like insinuates on page 203. That's what Harry wants. Look at this imagery. He looked in the mirror again. A woman standing right behind his reflection was smiling at him and waving. He reached out a hand and felt the air behind him. If she were really there, he'd touch her. The reflections were so close, but he felt only air. She and the others existed only in the mirror. She was a very pretty woman. She had dark red hair, and her eyes were just like mine, Harry thought, edging a little closer to the glass. Bright green, exactly the same shape, but then he noticed that she was crying, smiling but crying at the same time. The tall, thin, black-haired man standing next to her put his arms around her. He wore glasses, and his hair was very untidy. It stuck up at the back, just as Harry's did. Harry was so close to the mirror now that his nose was nearly touching that of his reflection. Mom, he whispered. Dad. They just looked at him, smiling, and slowly Harry looked into the faces of other people in the mirror and saw other pairs of green eyes like his, other noses like his, and even a little old man who looked as though he had Harry's knobbly knees. Harry was looking at his family for the first time in his life. The Potter smiled and waved at Harry, and he stared hungrily back at them, his hands pressed flat against the glass as though he was hoping to fall right through it and reach them. He had a powerful kind of ache inside him, half joy, half terrible sadness. What do you guys think of that? Those pages 208 and 209 that I just read. I love the imagery of his family and showing also the emotion of it. Right? I love the last line. He had a powerful kind of ache inside him, half joy, half terrible sadness. Right? And I think that happens to a lot of us when we've lost family. That you have this joy in having known that person that you've lost in your life, but at the same time, a sadness because they've left you. And I have had a recent experience with that. I just recently lost my mother about 6 months ago, and it's just been kind of like this roller coaster of emotions. But I've always thought about this line because it does ache at you to know that you've known this wonderful person, but at the same time, and have joyful memories, but at the same time have the powerful ache of missing them. So I understand that feeling, and maybe some of you have had that feeling as well too. I'm not sure if you've had, but it is a bittersweet kind of feeling. Would you guys agree? For those of you who maybe have lost a loved one, maybe a grandfather or a grandmother, or even a sibling or a parent as well too, right? So a few of you agree, so you've had the same kind of thing. So I always think that Mir Erised, you know, and also, have you had anybody tell you that you look like a family member that has passed away, that maybe you never knew? Because that happened to me, like when my grandmother died. I really didn't know her very well on my mother's side, and people were like, "Oh my God, you look just like your grandmother." And now that my mother has passed away, I've run into some of her friends, and they're like, they usually are a little bit, if they don't know me very well, they're like usually stunned because I look like my mother. So they're usually like, "Oh my God, it's like looking at your mother," you know. So anyway, I understand Harry's feeling there. Now, eventually he takes Ron to go see the Mirror of Erised. What does Ron see in the Mirror of Erised?
He's head boy.
He is head boy, right? It's a little bit of foreshadowing, isn't it? I think, because he actually becomes a prefect in book 6. He and Hermione are selected as prefects, which I think is absolutely hilarious that Ron is a prefect. So, right, and he sees himself holding the Quidditch cup, and he's Quidditch captain, right? And it's like it's everything his brothers are or were. His Bill, right? I'm wearing the badge like Bill used to, and I'm holding the house cup. Charlie, I believe, played Quidditch as well too, and Bill, and they were all successful at Hogwarts. And I think he sees his desire is to be as successful as his brothers. Of course, Harry's like, no, you can't be seeing that because I see what I see, right? And eventually we get the very important scene where Dumbledore appears as Harry is spending time in front of the mirror. Page 213. And he even says, he tells him, he gives him a little hint of things, right? And he says, "You, like hundreds before, have discovered the delights of the Mirror of Erised," right? And he tells him what it is, right? And he goes, "How did you know?" And he goes, "I don't need a cloak to become invisible," said Dumbledore, right? That's a little hint that's who he got it from. Oh, it's 12:45. I'm so sorry, guys. The class is over. You guys should have stopped me. I will put the homework in an announcement on Canvas. Don't worry, Morales. Go and get it later. Hey, you guys, I know you might have another class or somewhere to be. We'll talk about the Mirror of Erised. We'll finish chapter 12 and then chapters 13 through 17 for Wednesday, and maybe even the whole book. Okay? Thank you for letting me know. See you Wednesday. Bye, guys. If anybody needs to talk to me, I'll see
Bye,
you.
Professor.
Bye, guys. Sorry about that. I'm going to put it. Yeah, I'm going to put it at the beginning. I'm going to put it as the announcement in Canvas. It's just to watch it. It'll be due like Wednesday or Friday. Probably Wednesday. It's just to watch a little video. It's nothing difficult. You're welcome. Too.